Welcome to Tech with Kaushik. This is part 8 of our complete practice question series for the CLF-C02 AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner exam. Choose your answer before the timer ends, then review the correct answer, explanation, and exam tip. Let us begin part 8. Question number 388. An organization is launching a mobile app in the AWS cloud. The company wants the app's users to sign in through social media identity providers, IDPs. What AWS service can satisfy this requirement? Option A, AWS Lambda. Option B, Amazon Cognito. Option C, AWS Secrets Manager. Option D, Amazon CloudFront. The correct answer is B, Amazon Cognito. Here is why. Amazon Cognito adds user sign-up and sign-in to applications and supports federation with social identity providers. Why are the other options not correct? Lambda runs event-driven code. C. Secrets Manager stores and rotates application secrets. D. CloudFront delivers content through edge locations. Exam tip. Cognito provides customer identity, authentication, and social sign-in for applications. Question number 389. An organization needs to use machine learning capabilities to analyze log data from its Amazon EC2 instances and efficiently conduct security investigations. What AWS service can satisfy these requirements? Option A, Amazon Inspector. Option B, Amazon QuickSight. Option C, Amazon Detective. D, Amazon Guard Duty. The correct answer is C, Amazon Detective. Here is why. Amazon Detective analyzes security data with machine learning and visualizations to help investigate suspicious activity involving resources such as EC2 instances. Why are the other options not correct? Inspector identifies software vulnerabilities and unintended network exposure. B. QuickSight provides general business intelligence and visualization. D. Guard Duty detects potential threats, but Detective focuses on investigation and root cause. Exam tip. Guard Duty detects threats. Detective helps investigate their context and root cause. Question number 390. An organization needs to categorize and track AWS usage cost based on business categories. What AWS service or feature should the company use to satisfy these requirements? Option A, cost allocation tags. Option B, AWS organizations. Option C, AWS Security Hub. Option D, AWS Cost and Usage Report. The correct answer is A, cost allocation tags. Here is why. Cost allocation tags label AWS resources with business categories so costs can be organized, filtered, and reported by those categories. Why are the other options not correct? B. Organizations manages multiple accounts and consolidated billing. C. Security Hub aggregates security findings. D. Cost and usage reports provide detailed records but tags supply the business categories. Exam tip. Activate cost allocation tags to categorize AWS costs by project, team, or department. Question number 391. What AWS well-architected framework pillar focuses on structured and streamlined allocation of computing resources? Option A, reliability. Option B, operational excellence. Option C, performance efficiency. Option D, sustainability. The correct answer is C, performance efficiency. Here is why. Performance efficiency focuses on selecting and using computing resources efficiently while adapting as requirements and technologies change. Why are the other options not correct? Reliability focuses on consistent operation and recovery from failures. B. Operational excellence focuses on operations, monitoring, and continuous improvement. D. Sustainability focuses on minimizing environmental impact. Exam tip. Performance efficiency means using the right resources efficiently as demand changes. Question number 392. What AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, AWS CAF, capabilities belong to the governance perspective? Choose 2. Option A, Program and Project Management. Option B, Product Management. Option C, Portfolio Management. Option D, Risk Management. E, Event Management. The correct answer is A, Program and Project Management. D, Risk Management. Here is why. Both are governance perspective capabilities. They coordinate cloud initiatives and identify, assess, and manage transformation-related risks. Why are the other options not correct? B, Product Management belongs to the business perspective. C, Portfolio Management belongs to the business perspective. E, Event Management belongs to the operations perspective. Exam tip. CAF governance includes program management, risk, finance, and data governance. Question number 393. An organization needs to use AWS Managed Services, AMS, for operational support and needs to understand the scope of AMS. What AMS feature can satisfy these requirements? Option A, Landing Zone and Network Management. Option B, Customer Application Development. Option C, Dev Secretary Ops Pipeline Configuration. Option D, Application Log Monitoring. The correct answer is A, Landing Zone and Network Management. Here is why. AMS can operate managed landing zones and supporting infrastructure, including network configurations, account governance, monitoring, patching, and incident management. Why are the other options not correct? B, Customers remain responsible for developing their business applications. C, Customer development teams generally configure their application delivery pipelines. D, AMS monitors supported infrastructure but does not generally own application log analysis. Exam tip. AMS operates AWS infrastructure. Customers retain responsibility for application code. Question number 394. An organization needs to migrate its on-premises NoSQL workload to Amazon DynamoDB. What AWS service can satisfy this requirement? Option A, AWS Migration Hub. Option B, AWS Database Migration Service, AWS DMS. Option C, Migration Evaluator. Option D, AWS Application Migration Service. The correct answer is B, AWS Database Migration Service, AWS DMS. Here is why. AWS DMS migrates supported database workloads to AWS targets, including migrations from supported NoSQL sources to Amazon DynamoDB. Why are the other options not correct? Migration Hub centrally tracks migration progress. C, Migration Evaluator creates a data-driven migration business case. D, Application Migration Service migrates servers rather than database data. Exam tip. Use AWS DMS for database migration and Application Migration Service for servers. Question number 395. An organization is in the process of finding correct Amazon EC2 instance types and sizes to meet its performance and capacity requirements. The company needs to find the lowest possible cost. What option accurately characterizes the company's actions? Option A, Auto-scaling. Option B, Storage tiering. Option C, Right-sizing. Option D, Instance scheduling. The correct answer is C, Right-sizing. Here is why. Right-sizing selects resource types and sizes that satisfy performance and capacity requirements without paying for unnecessary capacity. Why are the other options not correct? Auto-scaling adjusts the number of resources as demand changes. B, Storage tiering moves data among storage classes based on access requirements. D, Instance scheduling starts and stops resources according to a schedule. Exam tip. Right-sizing matches resource capacity to workload requirements at the lowest cost. Question number 396. An organization needs to define a central data protection policy that works across AWS services for compute, storage, and database resources. What AWS service can satisfy this requirement? Option A, AWS Batch. Option B, AWS Elastic Disaster Recovery. Option C. AWS Backup. Option D. Amazon FSx. The correct answer is C. AWS Backup. Here is why. AWS Backup centrally defines and applies policy-based backup and data protection plans across supported compute, storage, and database services. Why are the other options not correct? A. AWS Batch runs batch computing jobs. B. Elastic Disaster Recovery supports server recovery and disaster recovery. D. Amazon FSx provides managed file systems. Exam tip. AWS Backup centrally manages backup policies across supported AWS services. Question number 397. An organization needs to manage sign-in security for workforce users. The company needs to create workforce users and centrally manage their access across all the company's AWS accounts and applications. What AWS service can satisfy these requirements? Option A. AWS Audit Manager. Option B. Amazon Cognito. Option C. AWS Security Hub. Option D. AWS IAM Identity Center. AWS Single Sign-On. The correct answer is D. AWS IAM Identity Center. AWS Single Sign-On. Here is why. IAM Identity Center creates or connects workforce identities and centrally manages their access to multiple AWS accounts and applications. Why are the other options not correct? Audit Manager collects evidence for audits. B. Cognito provides customer identity for web and mobile applications. C. Security Hub aggregates security findings. Exam tip. IAM Identity Center manages workforce access. Cognito manages application customers. Question number 398. An organization has deployed a web application to Amazon EC2 instances. The EC2 instances have low usage. What AWS service or feature should the company use to right-size the EC2 instances? Option A. AWS Config. Option B. AWS Cost Anomaly Detection. Option C. AWS Budgets. Option D. AWS Compute Optimizer. The correct answer is D. AWS Compute Optimizer. Here is why. Compute Optimizer analyzes utilization metrics and recommends appropriately sized EC2 instance configurations for performance and cost efficiency. Why are the other options not correct? A. AWS Config tracks configurations and evaluates compliance. B. Cost Anomaly Detection identifies unusual spending patterns. C. AWS Budgets tracks spending or usage against thresholds. Exam tip. Compute Optimizer recommends resource sizes from observed utilization metrics. Question number 399. What AWS service or resource can identify and provide reports on IAM resources in one AWS account that is shared with another AWS account? Option A. IAM Credential Report. Option B. AWS IAM Identity Center. AWS Single Sign-On. Option C. AWS Identity and Access Management Access Analyzer. Option D. Amazon Cognito User Pool. The correct answer is C. AWS Identity and Access Management Access Analyzer. Here is why. IAM Access Analyzer identifies resources that policies allow principals in other AWS accounts or external entities to access. Why are the other options not correct? A. A credential report lists IAM users and credential status. B. IAM Identity Center centrally manages workforce access. D. A Cognito user pool manages application users. Exam tip. Access Analyzer identifies external access created by resource-based policies. Question number 400. What cloud concept is demonstrated by using AWS Cost Explorer? Option A. Right-sizing. Option B. Reliability. Option C. Resilience. Option D. Modernization. The correct answer is A. Right sizing. Here is why. Cost Explorer can identify idle or underutilized EC2 instances and provide recommendations to terminate or reduce their size. Why are the other options not correct? B. Reliability concerns consistent operation and recovery from failures. C. Resilience is the ability to withstand or recover from disruption. D. Modernization updates applications and architectures using newer technologies. Exam tip. Cost Explorer can reveal right-sizing opportunities from cost and utilization data. Question number 401. An organization uses a third-party identity provider, IDP. The company needs to provide its employees with access to AWS accounts and services without requiring another set of login credentials. What AWS service can satisfy this requirement? Option A. AWS Directory Service. Option B. Amazon Cognito. Option C. AWS IAM Identity Center. Option D. AWS Resource Access Manager. AWS RAM. The correct answer is C. AWS IAM Identity Center. Here is why. IAM Identity Center can federate with an external identity provider so employees use existing credentials to access assigned AWS accounts and applications. Why are the other options not correct? Directory Service provides managed directory capabilities, but is not the direct answer here. B. Cognito manages identities for customer-facing applications. D. AWS RAM shares supported resources across accounts. Exam tip. IAM Identity Center federates workforce access across AWS accounts and applications. Question number 402. What AWS service can migrate data between AWS storage services? Option A. AWS Data Sync. Option B. AWS Direct Connect. Option C. AWS Lake Formation. Option D. Amazon S3. The correct answer is A. AWS Data Sync. Here is why. Data Sync automates and accelerates data transfers between supported AWS storage services and between on-premises storage and AWS. Why are the other options not correct? B. Direct Connect provides dedicated network connectivity. C. Lake Formation helps build, secure, and manage data lakes. D. Amazon S3 is object storage, not a managed transfer service. Exam tip. Data Sync transfers data. Direct Connect supplies network connectivity. Question number 403. What AWS service or resource can a company use to deploy AWS WAF rules? Option A. Amazon EC2. Option B. Application Load Balancer. Option C. AWS Trusted Advisor. Option D. Network Load Balancer. The correct answer is B. Application Load Balancer. Here is why. An AWS WAF Web ACL can be associated with an application load balancer to filter HTTP and HTTPS requests before they reach application targets. Why are the other options not correct? A WAF rules are not attached directly to individual EC2 instances. C. Trusted Advisor provides best practice recommendations. D. Network Load Balancer operates at the transport layer and does not support AWS WAF Web ACLs. Exam tip. AWS WAF integrates with supported Layer 7 resources such as application load balancers. Question number 404. An organization is planning to migrate applications to the AWS cloud. During a system audit, the company finds that its content management system, CMS, application is incompatible with cloud environments. What migration strategies will help the company to migrate the CMS application with the least effort? Choose 2. Option A. Retire. Option B. Rehost. Option C. Repurchase. Option D. Replatform. E. Refactor. The correct answer is A. Retire. C. Repurchase. Here is why. Retiring removes an application that is no longer required. Repurchasing replaces it with a cloud-compatible product, avoiding extensive redevelopment. Why are the other options not correct? B. Rehosting cannot resolve an application that is incompatible with cloud environments. D. Replatforming requires modifying components to operate in the cloud. E. Refactoring requires extensive redesign and has the greatest migration effort. Exam tip. Retire unused applications and repurchase incompatible software when effort must be low. Question number 405. An organization runs MySQL database workloads on self-managed servers in an on-premises data center. The company needs to migrate the database workloads to an AWS managed service. What migration strategy should the company use? Option A. Rehost. Option B. Repurchase. Option C. Refactor. Option D. Replatform. The correct answer is D. Replatform. Here is why. Replatforming moves the MySQL workload to a managed service such as Amazon RDS for MySQL while preserving the database engine and making targeted platform changes. Why are the other options not correct? Rehosting would move MySQL to infrastructure such as EC2 and remain self-managed. B. Repurchasing replaces the application with a different commercial product. C. Refactoring substantially redesigns the workload or application architecture. Exam tip. Moving a self-managed database to the same engine on RDS is replatforming. Question number 406. An organization uses Amazon Aurora as its database service. The company needs to encrypt its databases and database backups. What party manages the encryption of the database clusters and database snapshots under the AWS shared responsibility model? Option A. AWS. Option B. The company. Option C. AWS Marketplace Partners. Option D. Third-party partners. The correct answer is B. The company. Here is why. The customer chooses whether to encrypt Aurora clusters and snapshots and manages the associated encryption settings and access permissions. Why are the other options not correct? AWS secures and maintains the underlying managed database infrastructure. C. Marketplace partners do not manage the customer's Aurora encryption configuration. D. Third-party partners are not responsible unless the customer separately delegates work. Exam tip. AWS manages Aurora infrastructure. Customers manage data protection configurations. Question number 407. A new AWS user needs to interact with AWS support by using API calls. What AWS support plan can satisfy this requirement most cost-effectively? Option A. AWS Basic Support. Option B. AWS Developer Support. Option C. AWS Business Support. Option D. AWS Enterprise Support. The correct answer is C. AWS Business Support. Here is why. Business Support was historically the lowest cost plan that provided programmatic access to AWS support operations through the AWS Support API. Why are the other options not correct? Basic Support does not provide technical case management through the Support API. B. Developer Support did not include programmatic support API access. D. Enterprise Support provided the capability but at a higher cost. Exam tip. Historical support API questions generally required business support or higher. Question number 408. An organization needs to estimate the cost for its AWS architecture solution before migration. What AWS service or feature can satisfy this requirement? Option A. Amazon Detective. Option B. AWS Budgets. Option C. AWS Resource Explorer. Option D. AWS Pricing Calculator. The correct answer is D. AWS Pricing Calculator. Here is why. AWS Pricing Calculator estimates the cost of a planned AWS architecture before the company deploys or migrates the workload. Why are the other options not correct? Detective supports security investigations. B. AWS Budgets tracks cost or usage against configured thresholds. C. Resource Explorer searches for AWS resources across regions. Exam tip. Pricing Calculator estimates future costs. Cost Explorer analyzes existing spending. Question number 409. An organization must archive its documents by using a write once, read many, worm model to meet legal and compliance obligations. What feature of Amazon S3 can the company use to satisfy this requirement? Option A, S3 versioning. Option B, S3 bucket policy. Option C, S3 Glacier Vault Lock. Option D, S3 multi-factor authentication, MFA, delete. The correct answer is C, S3 Glacier Vault Lock. Here is why. Glacier Vault Lock applies a lockable retention policy to an S3 Glacier Vault, supporting write once, read many compliance requirements. Why are the other options not correct? A versioning preserves object versions but does not by itself enforce worm retention. B. A bucket policy controls access but can be modified by authorized principals. D. MFA delete adds protection to deletion operations but is not a worm compliance lock. Exam tip. Current S3 bucket worm questions normally refer to Amazon S3 object lock. Question number 410. What AWS service can companies use to subscribe to RSS feeds for updates about all AWS service issues? Option A, Amazon Simple Notification Service, Amazon SNS. Option B, AWS Health Dashboard. Option C, AWS Config. Option D, AWS Code Commit. The correct answer is B, AWS Health Dashboard. Here is why. The AWS Health Dashboard displays public AWS service events and provides health information that users can follow through available RSS feeds. Why are the other options not correct? Amazon SNS distributes messages, but is not the source of all AWS service status updates. C. AWS Config tracks resource configurations and compliance. D. Code Commit is a source control repository service. Exam tip. AWS Health provides service and account health events. EventBridge can automate alerts. Question number 411. An organization needs to host an application in a specific geographic area to comply with regulations. What feature of the AWS global infrastructure will help the company satisfy this requirement? Option A, scalability. Option B, global footprint. Option C, availability. Option D, performance. The correct answer is B, global footprint. Here is why. AWS provides regions in multiple geographic areas, allowing the company to select a location that satisfies data residency and regulatory requirements. Why are the other options not correct? Scalability concerns increasing or decreasing capacity. C. Availability concerns continued operation during failures. D. Performance concerns efficiently meeting workload requirements. Exam tip. Select an AWS region based on compliance, latency, cost, and service availability. Question number 412. An organization is hosting a web application on Amazon EC2 instances. The company needs to implement custom conditions to filter and control inbound web traffic. What AWS service can satisfy these requirements? Option A, Amazon Guard Duty. Option B, AWS WAF. Option C, Amazon Macie. Option D, AWS Shield. The correct answer is B, AWS WAF. Here is why. AWS WAF applies customizable rules that allow, block, or monitor inbound web requests based on conditions such as IP addresses, headers, and request patterns. Why are the other options not correct? Guard Duty detects potential threats from AWS data sources. C. Macie discovers and helps protect sensitive data in Amazon S3. D. Shield provides DDoS protection, but does not provide custom web request filtering rules. Exam tip. WAF filters web requests. Shield protects against DDoS attacks. Question number 413. What Amazon EC2 reserved instances term commitment will give users the most cost savings? Option A, 1 year. Option B, 2 years. Option C, 3 years. Option D, 5 years. The correct answer is C. 3 years. Here is why. EC2 reserved instances are available with 1-year or 3-year commitments, and the 3-year term provides the larger potential discount. Why are the other options not correct? A 1-year commitment provides less savings than a 3-year commitment. B. A standard 2-year reserved instance term is not offered directly by AWS. D. A standard 5-year reserved instance term is not offered directly by AWS. Exam tip. EC2 reserved instance terms are 1 or 3 years. Longer terms save more. Question number 414. An organization uses Amazon EC2 instances to run its application. The application needs to be available and running continuously for 3 or more years. What type of EC2 instance should the company purchase for a discount on the EC2 pricing? Option A. Reserved instances. Option B. Spot instances. Option C. On-demand instances. Option D. EC2 fleet. The correct answer is A. Reserved instances. Here is why. Reserved instances provide discounted EC2 pricing for predictable, sustained usage when the company commits to an eligible 1-year or 3-year term. Why are the other options not correct? B. Spot instances can be interrupted and do not guarantee continuous availability. C. On-demand instances provide flexibility but no commitment-based discount. The EC2 fleet launches groups of instances but is not a commitment discount model. Exam tip. Use commitments for predictable sustained EC2 usage and spot for flexible workloads. Question number 415. An organization needs to perform an audit of recent AWS account activity. The audit will investigate who initiated an event and what actions were performed. What AWS service should the company use to satisfy these requirements? Option A. AWS config. Option B. Amazon Rekognition. Option C. AWS CloudTrail. Option D. Amazon Simple Notification Service. Amazon SNS. The correct answer is C. AWS CloudTrail. Here is why. CloudTrail records supported AWS API and account activity, including the identity that initiated an event and the actions that were performed. Why are the other options not correct? A. AWS config tracks resource configuration and compliance. B. Rekognition analyzes images and video. D. Amazon SNS provides publish-subscribe messaging. Exam tip. CloudTrail answers who performed an AWS API action, what occurred, and when. Question number 416. What recommendation can AWS Cost Explorer provide to help reduce cost? Option A. Use a specific database engine. Option B. Change the programming language for an application. Option C. Deploy a specific operating system. Option D. Terminate an idle instance. The correct answer is D. Terminate an idle instance. Here is why. Cost Explorer right-sizing recommendations can identify idle EC2 instances and recommend termination to eliminate unnecessary cost. Why are the other options not correct? Cost Explorer does not select an application's database engine. B. It does not recommend changing application programming languages. C. It does not choose an operating system based on application requirements. Exam tip. Cost Explorer can recommend downsizing or terminating idle EC2 instances. Question number 417. An organization needs to deploy an application in multiple availability zones in a single AWS region. What benefit will this deployment provide to the company? Option A. Improved connection performance for global customers. Option B. Resilient architecture and a highly available solution. Option C. Reduced overall data storage costs. Option D. Ability to shut down an availability zone during periods of low demand. The correct answer is B. Resilient architecture and a highly available solution. Here is why. Deploying across multiple availability zones reduces dependence on one isolated location and allows the application to continue operating during an availability zone failure. Why are the other options not correct? Global performance normally requires edge services or multiple regions. C. Multi-availability zone deployment does not inherently reduce storage costs. D. Customers cannot shut down an AWS availability zone. Exam tip. Multi-availability zone improves availability within one region. Multi-region supports global reach. Question number 418. A university receives a grant to conduct research by using AWS services. The research team needs to make sure the grant money lasts for the entire school year. The team has decided on a monthly allocation that adds up to the total grant amount. What AWS service or feature will notify the team if spending exceeds the planned amount? Option A. AWS budgets. Option B. Cost Explorer. Option C. Cost allocation tags. Option D. Cost categories. The correct answer is A. AWS budgets. Here is why. AWS budgets tracks actual or forecasted spending against a configured monthly amount and sends notifications when thresholds are reached or exceeded. Why are the other options not correct? B. Cost Explorer analyzes cost and usage trends. C. Cost allocation tags categorize resource costs. D. Cost categories group cost and usage into business-defined classifications. Exam tip. Budgets alerts on thresholds. Cost Explorer analyzes spending patterns. Question number 419. An organization has migrated its workload to the AWS cloud. The company needs to optimize existing Amazon EC2 resources. What AWS services or tools provide this functionality? Choose 2. Option A. AWS Elastic Beanstalk. Option B. AWS Cost Explorer. Option C. Amazon Detective. Option D. AWS Compute Optimizer. E. AWS Billing Conductor. The correct answer is B. AWS Cost Explorer. D. AWS Compute Optimizer. Here is why. Cost Explorer provides EC2 right-sizing and idle resource cost insights. Compute Optimizer analyzes utilization metrics and recommends more efficient EC2 configurations. Why are the other options not correct? A. Elastic Beanstalk deploys and manages applications. C. Detective supports security investigations. E. Billing Conductor creates customized billing views. Exam tip. Cost Explorer analyzes cost opportunities. Compute Optimizer recommends resource sizes. Question number 420. An organization with multiple accounts and teams needs to set up a new multi-account AWS environment. What AWS service supports this requirement? Option A. AWS Cloud Formation. Option B. AWS Control Tower. Option C. AWS Config. Option D. Amazon Virtual Private Cloud. Amazon VPC. The correct answer is B. AWS Control Tower. Here is why. Control Tower establishes and governs a multi-account AWS environment by creating a landing zone and applying account controls and governance. Why are the other options not correct? A cloud formation provisions resources from infrastructure templates. C. AWS Config tracks configurations and evaluates compliance. D. Amazon VPC provides isolated virtual networks. Exam tip. Control Tower creates a governed multi-account landing zone using AWS best practices. Question number 421. An organization needs access to checks and recommendations that help the company follow AWS best practices for cost optimization, security, fault tolerance, performance, and service quotas. What combination of an AWS service and AWS support plan on the AWS account can satisfy these requirements? Option A. AWS Trusted Advisor with AWS Developer Support. Option B. AWS Health Dashboard with AWS Enterprise Support. Option C. AWS Trusted Advisor with AWS Business Support. Option D. AWS Health Dashboard with AWS Enterprise On-Ramp Support. The correct answer is C. AWS Trusted Advisor with AWS Business Support. Here is why. Trusted Advisor provides checks for cost optimization, security, fault tolerance, performance, and service quotas. Business Support unlocks the full set of checks. Why are the other options not correct? Developer Support provides only core Trusted Advisor checks. B. AWS Health Report Service and Resource Health, not best practice checks. D. AWS Health does not provide the requested optimization recommendations. Exam tip. Trusted Advisor evaluates AWS environments against best practices. Question number 422. What AWS service helps users plan and track their server and application inventory migration data to AWS? Option A. Amazon CloudWatch. Option B. AWS Data Sync. Option C. AWS Migration Hub. Option D. AWS Application Migration Service. The correct answer is C. AWS Migration Hub. Here is why. Migration Hub provides one location to plan and track server and application inventory and migration progress across supported migration tools. Why are the other options not correct? A CloudWatch monitors applications and AWS resources. B. Data Sync transfers files and object data. D. Application Migration Service performs lift and shift server migrations. Exam tip. Migration Hub tracks migrations. Migration tools move the workloads. Question number 423. What AWS team or offering helps users accelerate cloud adoption through paid engagements in any of several specialty practice areas? Option A. AWS Enterprise Support. Option B. AWS Solutions Architects. Option C. AWS Professional Services. Option D. AWS Account Managers. The correct answer is C. AWS Professional Services. Here is why. AWS Professional Services provides paid engagements with AWS specialists to accelerate cloud adoption across technical practice areas. Why are the other options not correct? Enterprise Support provides ongoing technical support and guidance. B. Solutions Architects provide architectural guidance but do not define this paid specialty engagement offering. D. Account Managers support the commercial relationship with AWS. Exam tip. Professional Services provides paid expertise for cloud initiatives. Question number 424. An organization needs to purchase Amazon EC2 instances to support an application that will run continuously for more than 1 year. What EC2 instance purchasing option meets these requirements most cost-effectively? Option A. Dedicated instances. Option B. Spot instances. Option C. Reserved instances. Option D. On-demand instances. The correct answer is C. Reserved instances. Here is why. Reserved instances provide discounted EC2 pricing for predictable, continuous workloads when the company makes a 1-year or 3-year commitment. Why are the other options not correct? Dedicated instances address tenant isolation and normally cost more. B. Spot instances can be interrupted and do not suit continuous applications. D. On-demand instances require no commitment but normally cost more over time. Exam tip. Use commitments for predictable workloads and spot for flexible work. Question number 425. What programming languages does AWS Cloud Development Kit, AWS CDK, currently support? Choose 2. Option A, Python. Option B, Swift. Option C, TypeScript. Option D, Ruby, ePHP. The correct answer is A, Python, C, TypeScript. Here is why. Python and TypeScript are both officially supported programming languages for defining AWS infrastructure with the AWS CDK. Why are the other options not correct? B. Swift is not an officially supported AWS CDK language. D. Ruby is not an officially supported AWS CDK language. E. PHP is not an officially supported AWS CDK language. Exam tip. AWS CDK supports TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, Java, C# and Go. Question number 426. An organization plans to migrate its custom marketing application and order processing application to AWS. The company needs to deploy the applications on different types of instances with various configurations of CPU, memory, storage, and networking capacity. What AWS service should the company use to satisfy these requirements? Option A, AWS Lambda. Option B, Amazon Cognito. Option C, Amazon Athena. Option D, Amazon EC2. The correct answer is D, Amazon EC2. Here is why. Amazon EC2 provides configurable virtual servers with many combinations of CPU, memory, storage, and networking capacity. Why are the other options not correct? Lambda runs event-driven code without managing virtual server instances. B. Cognito provides application identity and user authentication. C. Athena provides serverless SQL queries for data in Amazon S3. Exam tip. EC2 provides resizable virtual servers with varied instance families. Question number 427. What AWS service can a company use to manage encryption keys in the cloud? Option A, AWS License Manager. Option B, AWS Certificate Manager, ACM. Option C, AWS Cloud HSM. Option D, AWS Directory Service. The correct answer is C, AWS Cloud HSM. Here is why. Cloud HSM provides dedicated hardware security modules where customers can generate, store, and manage cryptographic keys. Why are the other options not correct? License Manager tracks and manages software licenses. B. ACM provisions and manages supported TLS certificates. D. Directory Service provides managed directory capabilities. Exam tip. Cloud HSM provides dedicated HSMs and customer-controlled key material. Question number 428. How can the AWS Cloud help companies build agility into their processes and cloud infrastructure? Option A. Companies can avoid provisioning too much capacity when they do not know how much capacity is required. Option B. Companies can expand into new geographic regions. Option C. Companies can access a range of technologies to experiment and innovate quickly. Option D. Companies can pay for IT resources only when they use the resources. The correct answer is C. Companies can access a range of technologies to experiment and innovate quickly. Here is why. AWS Agility enables companies to provision technologies rapidly, experiment with ideas, and release innovations without long procurement cycles. Why are the other options not correct? Avoiding excess capacity is primarily an elasticity benefit. B. Expanding geographically demonstrates global reach. D. Paying only for usage describes pay-as-you-go cloud economics. Exam tip. Agility means experimenting and deploying quickly. Question number 429. What AWS design principle emphasizes the reduction of interdependencies between components of an application? Option A. Scalability. Option B. Loose coupling. Option C. Automation. Option D. Caching. The correct answer is B. Loose coupling. Here is why. Loose coupling reduces dependencies so components can fail, change, or scale with less effect on other application components. Why are the other options not correct? Scalability concerns increasing or decreasing workload capacity. C. Automation reduces manual processes and improves consistency. D. Caching stores reusable data to improve performance. Exam tip. Loose coupling prevents one component's failure from cascading. Question number 430. An organization has temporary workload that is also variable. The company needs to use Amazon EC2 instances for the workload. The EC2 instances need to handle short bursts of work that cannot stop before finishing. What purchase option can satisfy these requirements? Option A. Spot instances. Option B. On-demand instances. Option C. Savings plan. Option D. reserved instances. The correct answer is B. On-demand instances. Here is why. On-demand instances require no long-term commitment and are not subject to spot interruption, suiting temporary variable work that must finish. Why are the other options not correct? Spot instances can be interrupted before the work finishes. C. Savings plans require a consistent usage commitment. D. Reserved instances suit predictable, sustained workloads. Exam tip. Use on-demand for temporary workloads that cannot tolerate interruption. Question number 431. An organization needs to use SQL syntax to perform a direct query of objects in an Amazon S3 bucket. What AWS service can the company use to satisfy this requirement? Option A. AWS Glue. Option B. Amazon Athena. Option C. AWS Lambda. Option D. Amazon Kinesis. The correct answer is B. Amazon Athena. Here is why. Athena is a serverless query service that uses standard SQL to analyze data stored directly in Amazon S3. Why are the other options not correct? AWS Glue discovers, prepares, and integrates data. C. Lambda runs code in response to events. D. Kinesis processes real-time streaming data. Exam tip. Athena runs serverless SQL queries directly against data in S3. Question number 432. Where can users find examples of AWS Cloud Solution designs? Option A. AWS Marketplace. Option B. AWS Service Catalog. Option C. AWS Architecture Center. Option D. AWS Trusted Advisor. The correct answer is C. AWS Architecture Center. Here is why. The AWS Architecture Center provides reference architectures, solution diagrams, architecture guidance, and cloud design examples. Why are the other options not correct? Marketplace provides third-party software and services. B. Service Catalog distributes approved cloud products. D. Trusted Advisor provides best practice checks and recommendations. Exam tip. Use the Architecture Center for AWS reference designs and diagrams. Question number 433. What AWS service or tool gives a company the ability to release application changes in an automated way? Option A. Amazon AppFlow. Option B. AWS Code Deploy. Option C. AWS Private Link. Option D. Amazon EKS Distro. The correct answer is B. AWS Code Deploy. Here is why. Code Deploy automates application deployments to supported compute services and helps release new application versions consistently. Why are the other options not correct? AppFlow transfers data between supported applications and AWS services. C. Private Link provides private connectivity to supported services. D. EKS Distro provides Kubernetes distribution components. Exam tip. Code Deploy automates application releases to supported compute targets. Question number 434. What AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, AWS CAF, perspective focuses on managing identities and permissions at scale? Option A. Operations. Option B. Platform. Option C. Governance. Option D. Security. The correct answer is D. Security. Here is why. The AWS CAF security perspective includes identity and access management for controlling identities, permissions, and access at scale. Why are the other options not correct? Operations focuses on operating and supporting cloud workloads. B. Platform focuses on infrastructure and application delivery. C. Governance focuses on oversight, risk, finance, and compliance. Exam tip. CAF security includes identity, detection, protection, and response. Question number 435. What AWS service or feature allows users to securely store encrypted credentials and retrieve these credentials when required? Option A. AWS Encryption SDK. Option B. AWS Security Hub. Option C, AWS Secrets Manager. Option D, AWS Artifact. The correct answer is C, AWS Secrets Manager. Here is why. Secrets Manager securely stores encrypted credentials and allows authorized applications and users to retrieve or rotate those secrets. Why are the other options not correct? A. Encryption SDK helps applications encrypt and decrypt data. B. Security Hub aggregates security findings. D. Artifact provides AWS compliance reports and agreements. Exam tip. Secrets Manager stores and can rotate credentials and application secrets. Question number 436. An organization needs to discover, prepare, move, and integrate data from multiple sources for data analytics and machine learning. What AWS serverless data integration service should the company use to satisfy these requirements? Option A, AWS Glue. Option B, AWS Data Exchange. Option C, Amazon Athena. Option D, Amazon EMR. The correct answer is A, AWS Glue. Here is why. AWS Glue is a serverless data integration service for discovering, preparing, moving, cataloging, and combining data for analytics and ML. Why are the other options not correct? B. Data Exchange provides access to third-party datasets. C. Athena queries data with SQL but is not the full data integration service. D. EMR runs supported big data processing frameworks. Exam tip. Glue integrates and catalogs data. Athena queries data in S3. Question number 437. What task is the responsibility of a company that is using Amazon RDS? Option A. Provision the underlying infrastructure. Option B. Create IAM policies to control administrative access to the service. Option C. Install the cables to connect the hardware for compute and storage. Option D. Install and patch the RDS operating system. The correct answer is B. Create IAM policies to control administrative access to the service. Here is why. Customers manage identities, permissions, and access to their RDS resources, while AWS manages the underlying infrastructure and operating system. Why are the other options not correct? AWS provisions and maintains the underlying RDS infrastructure. C. AWS manages the physical facilities, hardware, and cables. D. AWS installs and patches the underlying RDS operating system. Exam tip. With RDS, AWS manages infrastructure. Customers manage data and access. Question number 438. An organization's application is running on Amazon EC2 instances. The company is planning a partial migration to a serverless architecture in the next year and needs to pay for resources upfront. What AWS purchasing option will optimize the company's costs? Option A. Convertible reserved instances. Option B. Spot instances. Option C. EC2 instance savings plans. Option D. Compute savings plan. The correct answer is D. Compute savings plan. Here is why. Compute savings plans can cover EC2, Lambda, and Fargate usage, providing flexibility as the application moves toward serverless architecture. Why are the other options not correct? Convertible RIs apply to EC2 and do not cover serverless compute. B. Spot instances provide interruptible capacity without an upfront commitment. C. EC2 instance savings plans apply only to EC2 usage in a selected family and region. Exam tip. Compute savings plans remain flexible across EC2, Lambda, and Fargate. Question number 439. What AWS support plans provide access to an AWS Technical Account Manager, TAM? Choose 2. Option A. AWS Basic Support. Option B. AWS Developer Support. Option C. AWS Business Support. Option D. AWS Enterprise On-Ramp Support. E. AWS Enterprise Support. correct answer is D. AWS Enterprise On-Ramp Support, E. AWS Enterprise Support. Here is why. Enterprise On-Ramp provides access to TAMs, while Enterprise Support includes a designated TAM for strategic and operational guidance. Why are the other options not correct? A. Basic support does not provide TAM access. B. Developer support does not include a TAM. C. Business support provides technical support, but does not include a TAM. Exam tip. TAM access is associated with enterprise-level AWS support offerings. Question number 440. Which of the following are ways to improve security on AWS? Choose 2. Option A. Using AWS Artifact. Option B. Granting the broadest permissions to all IAM roles. Option C. Running application code with AWS Cloud. Option D. Enabling multi-factor authentication MFA with Amazon Cognito. E. Using AWS Trusted Advisor security checks. The correct answer is D. Enabling multi-factor authentication MFA with Amazon Cognito. E. Using AWS Trusted Advisor security checks. Here is why. Cognito MFA adds an authentication factor for application users. Trusted Advisor identifies security gaps and recommends corrective actions. Why are the other options not correct? Artifact provides compliance documents but does not implement security controls. B. Broad permissions violate the principle of least privilege. C. The option does not identify a specific security control or practice. Exam tip. Improve security with MFA, least privilege, and security recommendations. Question number 441. An organization has batch workloads that need to run for short periods of time on Amazon EC2. The workloads can handle interruptions and can start again from where they ended. What is the most cost-effective EC2 instance purchasing option to satisfy these requirements? Option A. Reserved instances. Option B. Spot instances. Option C. Dedicated instances. Option D. On-demand instances. The correct answer is B. Spot instances. Here is why. Spot instances provide discounted spare EC2 capacity and suit short batch workloads that can tolerate interruption and resume processing. Why are the other options not correct? Reserved instances suit predictable sustained usage with a commitment. C. Dedicated instances address tenant isolation rather than minimum cost. D. On-demand avoids commitment but normally costs more than Spot. Exam tip. Spot is ideal for fault-tolerant, restartable batch processing. Question number 442. An organization is requesting Payment Card Industry, PCI, reports that validate the operating effectiveness of AWS security controls. How should the company obtain these reports? Option A. Contact AWS support. Option B. Download reports from AWS Artifact. Option C. Download reports from AWS Security Hub. Option D. Contact an AWS Technical Account Manager, TAM. The correct answer is B. Download reports from AWS Artifact. Here is why. AWS Artifact provides on-demand access to AWS compliance reports, including reports related to PCI and the effectiveness of AWS controls. Why are the other options not correct? A. AWS support is not the primary self-service location for compliance reports. C. Security Hub aggregates security findings rather than compliance documents. D. A TAM provides guidance but is not required to obtain these reports. Exam tip. Use AWS Artifact for AWS compliance reports and agreements. Question number 443. What AWS support plan provides the full set of AWS Trusted Advisor checks at the lowest cost? Option A. AWS Developer Support. Option B. AWS Business Support. Option C. AWS Enterprise On-Ramp Support. Option D. AWS Enterprise Support. The correct answer is B. AWS Business Support. Here is why. Business support provides the full set of trusted advisor checks at a lower support plan level than the enterprise support options listed. Why are the other options not correct? Developer support provides only core trusted advisor checks. C. Enterprise on-ramp includes more support features at a higher cost. D. Enterprise support includes advanced guidance at a higher cost. Exam tip. Business-level support historically unlocks the full trusted advisor set. Question number 444. An organization is using AWS for all its IT infrastructure. The company's developers are allowed to deploy applications on their own. The developers want to deploy their applications without having to provision the infrastructure themselves. What AWS service should the developers use to satisfy these requirements? Option A. AWS Cloud Formation. Option B. AWS Code Build. Option C. AWS Elastic Beanstalk. Option D. AWS Code Deploy. The correct answer is C. AWS Elastic Beanstalk. Here is why. Elastic Beanstalk lets developers deploy applications while the service provisions and manages capacity, scaling, load balancing, and health. Why are the other options not correct? Cloud Formation provisions infrastructure from templates but requires it to be defined. B. Code Build compiles source code and runs tests. D. Code Deploy automates deployments to existing compute environments. Exam tip. Elastic Beanstalk deploys applications and manages their environments. You have completed Part 8 of the CLF-C02 practice series. Continue your preparation by opening the complete playlist and watching the remaining parts in sequence. Please like this video, subscribe to Tech with Kaushik, and enable notifications for more certification exam preparation content. Share your score, questions, or feedback in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you in the next part.